Welcome to the Shiro Space Podcast. It may be a man's world, but it sits on a woman's earth. The philosophical and spiritual lives of Black women are often overlooked for the care and responsibilities that we take over others, career and ambitions, and whatever else can cloud our view and take our energy off ourselves. The Shiro Space Podcast is a place for Black women to connect and share their points of views, learnings, spirituality, and philosophy. A Shiro is a woman committed to expanding authentically in her sovereign expression. Join me for conversations with sisters and our allies to help unleash in you, me, and we the Shiro within. Welcome, everyone. This is Chikava back with a new conversation on the Shiro Space Podcast. In this series of conversations, I'm talking with other Black women about their spiritual journey. And in conversation, I said to myself, I've listened to a lot of other people talk about their journey, and it's fascinating and it's amazing. And I wanted to open up a space where Black women talk about our journeys, what we learned, and how we do it, how we get through this world. So today is extra special because visiting with me is Renee Kimberly Smith. I would say she is a community activist, cultural activist, educator, healer, priestess, community leader in terms of even community spiritual leader because of programs she does each year. And essentially, my tagline for Renee Kimberly Smith is, I am so grateful to be on the planet at the same time as her. That's how much she impacts me, inspires me. I'm in awe of everything she does, how she sustains her energy, which we're going to get into because sustainability is a real thing, and what inspires her, what is pulling her along through these journeys. Good afternoon, Renee.
Good afternoon, Chikava.
How are you feeling today?
I'm doing pretty well. Can't complain.
Good. So I'm first going to ask you, and I'm super interested because I've never heard her story, if you will. Will you share about your upbringing and the cultural community that you came up in?
Sure. So I was reared here in Bed-Stuy. I went to Boys and Girls High School. I had the opportunity to be around really great elders like Baba Stan Kennard. I worked in, actually, my first or second dance teacher actually was one of the first African dancers in Roots. So we had this opportunity of, like, we didn't realize who we were around until after we got older. My really good girlfriend and sister friend, Dr. Ayoko Wiles, her father is Lucas Wiles. And he was one of my first, like, drum dance teachers. He came to the studio. We told Baba Stan we wanted dance. And that's who came. He came. Baba Neil Clark came. His son came. Baba Ayanda Clark came. We were taking classes with some of the first set of artists that came from Guinea, West Africa. So that was Yusuf Kambasa. And so all of these different folks that we were able to be around. Grew up doing African Street Festival in the yard at Boys and Girls High School, and decided to pursue a career in folkloric dance specifically because of the connections that I had there. I wanted to continue to study that. But then also had an opportunity to think about, teaching and how do those things interact and where do they intersect. And so, throughout my career, I had the opportunity, of course, to then work with Barbara Chuck Davis. So I did Dance Africa for a couple of years. I toured with Forces of Nature. I toured with quite a few, I did quite a few things. So I always tell people when I get here in this present moment, it's just like the fifth iteration of a career for me because I've done all of it. I did nonprofit work for over 20 years. I'm still doing some coaching and business coaching around that, but it's not the basis of the work. I think now the work that I'm doing around transformation and spirituality and really locking into plant intelligence is probably where I needed to be. I always tell the story as my daughter was coming into this portal, I had a reading done, and they were like, "Hey, that there were really, really high level priests and herbalists that exist in your matrilineal line, and you're going to be one who brings that back." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm not doing that." At the time, I was in corporate America. I was doing work. I was getting ready to have my first child. What are you talking? Like, I'm not about to go learn something else. And then Spirit would have it that I had to have an experience with flower essences, which then opened the door for all of the flowers to start talking and saying, this is actually the work that you should be doing. This is the way that you need to be working in community. And so I've been there since. And so that's been the work. And so that work led me to my work as an initiate of Ifa and of Egbe. It's led me to the work of doing alchemy work and learning how to work with community. It's done this work around how do we look at wellness and balance, right? And what does balance look like for us? Because we live in a world that tells us that as an individual, we can stand and be balanced, but we come from an indigenous culture that says I isn't what we look for. We look for we, right? So we're a reflection of our own balance. We're a reflection of our own wellness. And how do we get to a place where we're able to do that? And so that's a lot of the work that I like to do. I like to go into classrooms and corporations and talk about how do we reconnect with our heart? How do we and they're like, what? I remember doing a Zoom about this with a company that was actually from London, and they had like 50 something people on this. At the time it was Teams. It was a Microsoft Teams call. And I didn't know which way it was going to go. Like, is this going to be well received? Well, I don't know what's happening, but it was reconnecting with ancestral intelligence. And we were talking about the plants, and we were just talking about it. Because remember, we weren't in person. That was during the COVID time. And I halfway got off the call and started getting dings on my phone like, oh my God, we hadn't thought about this. We hadn't thought about how this could actually shape our corporate culture in the way that we work with each other. And so doing that work has been very fulfilling for me, going into classrooms or PDs and talking about, using our water or using dance or using music or using, how we are reflections of our own environments, right? If your children are acting wild that day, I need you to take a reflection about how you woke up that day. And saying that to teachers is really hard because I know how hard they work. But I was like, how did you walk in the door? Because you're thinking that this little person isn't an empath and they're not picking up on your energy. And many times they picked up on it by the time you crossed the threshold. And because you never auto-corrected or was really clear with them, like, I'm having a hard day. Let us all have a moment where we're doing X, Y, and Z, that they picked it up and they went with that energy. And so how do we use those things or, the ways that we communicate that aren't through our words? How do we use that to kind of set up really good balanced spaces for us to thrive in? And so that's been the work.
The work is good. You work in the Board of Education as a freelancer. We did a beautiful workshop with some early teen girls and introduced them to a whole world of wellness, if you will. And you also do that work with the teachers too?
Yes.
Now, how has that been I do think COVID created an invitation where people finally, even the most machinist, ambitious among us kind of were like, well, how am I doing? After that third week on the couch. How has it been? Like, how are you seeing? Because I think that this is a lot about the subtlety of societal and cultural change. What was super weird 20 years ago. What do you mean you're walking around with a quartz crystal? The same person bought the huge $1,000 one, and it's in the center of their room now, for better or for worse. How do you see the tide shifting? And I think you've seen it a lot over the last 4 years, this shift.
So I think that one of the things that I was taught, the way that I kind of approach my work, I look at Dr. Fukuyao Bunseke. He was a Kikongo scholar, and he has a book called Self-Healing, The Powers of Ancient Africa. And one of the things he says in that book is that part of the work of a healer is to activate the healing in others. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of what I've seen is this ability to activate that, because we've gone so long with forgetting how connected we are, mm-hmm. that in that moment of putting on the hat of teacher, that role, it doesn't mean that your humanity has gone away. And what society has asked us to do is to remove our humanity in order to work for, quote unquote, the public good. And many times we don't realize in that working for the public good, we then also become reflections of toxic energy all the time. And so there isn't a place where we're actually checking in to make sure that we're okay. And so what I found is going into schools and being called to do PDs, or PDs actually even with parents, and doing very simple things, what I would consider simple, but they seem to be reawakening concepts with folks to say, like, you have these tools at your hand all the time. You can go and speak to water and ask water to help you, because it's one of the most primordial energies that we have access to. You can take a moment to learn how to breathe differently, different ways that you breathe. You breathe to activate, but sometimes you also breathe to relax. And you can call that in whenever you need to. You can take a moment to use your own Reiki energy to calm your nerves and calm yourself and understand where you need to be. Those things seem like you said, like the hooty doody and all the things from before, but people are very much more open to it right now. Going into a classroom and starting off the session with us doing the cha-cha slide. And it seems like so far-fetched. And I was like, when's the last time you laughed at yourself? Mm-hmm. Like, laughter is one of our healing radiations. That's one of the things that Dr. Fukuyao talks about in his book. All of these things are healing. It was the first premise for the Grand Rising Summer Solstice Summit. When we did it during COVID, it was, what are the things that we do as community that are healing radiations? Laughter is healing, cooking is healing, dancing is healing, sitting and talking with you is healing, touch is healing, all of these, drumming is healing, singing is healing, all of these things are healing radiations that we have access to. We forget that we have access to it.
I think we were maliciously hypnotized into forgetting.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about like kind of our frontal lobe, like it has a job to do, the egoic job of keeping us alive, but we're breaking through this hard crustiness that's been put on it for a few thousand, hundred, however you want to shake it, years. But it's people, it is an awakening. It is an awakening, and it's self-paced and self-timed. And it's such a beautiful time, especially to live in Brooklyn, when so many communities are culminating together, and you feel a palpable shift. And not only in terms of, there's always that first wave of excitement at new things, and then we have to wait and see how it settles in and develops. I used to tease about, I used to get frustrated with like the goddess. Everybody was goddess, 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 goddess. But people only wanted to be like Aphrodite or Oshun. You know what I mean? But as it settles in, and that also to me as women, that accessing goddess energy is becoming more faceted because it's so much of it had a male gaze reference.
Right.
Before. And the male gaze is starting to have less and less meaning for us.
Mm-hmm. And, the other part about that is that it's not just a male gaze, is that they actually constructed our reality around their gaze, right?
Truth.
So I always tell people, like, when we look at the calendar, the turtle was our first calendar because it has 12, 11, 12, 13. spikes and, and it goes with the moons and so on and so forth. And so some guy decided that it was a good idea to like literally shift our time.
Our concept of time.
And so instead of 13 months, we have 12 months. Instead of 28 days, we have some 30 days, some 31 days, because in their brain it made sense, right? But also their fear of what that power meant that however we construct this, we have control. And I think that piece is the biggest piece that still continues to control us. Like we haven't yet been able to reconnect with our cycles happening on the moons, or judging what's happening in our lives in those cycles, and trying to be kind of in these two realities at the same time, like one foot in, one foot out, and trying to figure out what the balance is. I think what's happening is with that awakening, there's more of us on that. And so what happens is those of us who are healing from our mother wounds, those of us who are dealing with parent wounds and things like that, we now have the opportunity to have another generation of children who will not have that issue.
Right.
Because we're able to do the healing and we need to, and we're passing down the things that it took us 20, 30 years to learn.
And what you just made me think of, it's like 100 years later, the concept of double consciousness is... it's different now. I now think of it more as it is a woman's earth, and these men have put a world on top of it, and to find, and that's so much about like the reconnecting with nature, and it's the simple things. It is very much. I think that the simplicity of your practice, it can grow, it can go on and on and on, but if you can find your rhythms, your things you do for 3 minutes now and again while you're on the sub, while you're waiting for someone, instead of picking up your phone, just how you fold in again and find your centeredness. Now, back to my questions. Tell me about the first time that you had a real inner experience of noticing spirit. I hear dance moving you. You started dancing when you were 4 or 5, like when you walked? Yeah.
Yes. I was one of those, would dance around and not understand what was happening, but I would just dance. And then my mom was like, yeah, we're going to put her in class for a little bit. And then I stopped for a while. And then when I came back to high school, I went kind of full throttle, took it in college and went from there. Interesting. I would say probably dance. It was probably one of the first places that happened in a secular setting. I think my family also belonged to, they're from the Caribbean. So my family's from Trinidad and Belize. And so many times in those Caribbean countries, you have Episcopalian and like very, very, like it's one or the other, like you don't do in between. So I think my family was Episcopalian for a really long time. And then one day my dad was like, we're going to try this Baptist church. And I don't know what made him do that switch.
So wait, where was your dad from?
He was from Belize.
And where's your mom from?
She's from Trinidad.
And so was your mom the Episcopalian?
Both of them were Episcopalian, actually.
Okay.
So they went to a church in Manhattan called Trinity Episcopalian Church for a long, like I remember sitting in the pews and the pews being bigger than us, and me and my little brother and they would like do, like my father did like the offerings or something like that, and they would leave. And my dad would I always know when you guys were paying attention because I would just see the book flip. He was like, I'd see the pages flip.
So many books.
we were so small and the pews were so big that when we were kneeling down, he was like, I just see the pages go, which made me know that you guys were paying attention. But yeah, one day he said, we're gonna go to a Baptist church. I was like, what's happening? I had to have been like preteens or maybe like 12 or 13. Like, why is my dad wanting to go to Baptist church? Something was happening with him in his own awakening. He was like, well, the whole family's going. And so, literally, the whole family's going. And I think that in that setting, the first place where I really felt spirit was singing. I had been singing for a really long time, but to sing and feel spirit mount while I was singing happened there. And there, I sang on choirs. I actually did Mama I Want to Sing. That was one of the reasons why I went into off-Broadway productions and things like that. Being able to sing and sing gospel music really kind of helped me connect to spirit. And that was the first time of really understanding, like, oh, we have these other gifts, or we've accessed another part of our brains that are not in quite dropped into reality that's happening right here. Like, I'm getting downloads and I'm not really clear about where or what, how, all of those things.
Definitely African American spirituals, and then what became gospel music was the place where our spirituality of origin broke through. And it's beautiful. And there's so many problems with the Abrahamic folks, because it keeps getting like, and that's why all of our most powerful singers come through these ways. I just want us to untangle from all that. But I grew up, my mother is Bahamian. So she was like, we're Episcopalian. My father, he was pretty flexible. His mom was Holiness Pentecostal. So when we moved to this small town of Boulder, Colorado, we had there's a small Baptist church, nice burgeoning community now as the years have come and gone. But my mom, of course, decided we were going to be Episcopalian. And my dad said, I'm not going to any church unless somebody comes up here and talks to me, like comes to the house and talks. And it was beautiful. Father Jim came up to the house and talked to him, and he was like, okay, I'll come to church. And they went on to do really cool things together. They created housing for low-income people. The church, like, there's a beautiful thing. That's why I get so frustrated with our situation on the macro, because there's no other established with buildings and resource community like the church. It's just, there's like a lot of problematic programming that goes on, but you can't beat the community for it. You just can't beat it. And I too, and to be Episcopalian, stand up, sit down, kneel, stand up, sit down, kneel, open the book. Like I still probably have everything memorized. I know I do. And I hit up in there twice a decade. The programming is so intense. Yeah. Did you have like the incense kind? The like Greek Orthodox?
Yes,
Yeah.
yep.
Like everything but the confessional.
Yep. Pretty much.
Catholic light.
Pretty much. But yeah, so that experience, and I think over time I'm starting to understand, and I talked a little bit about it in the idea around the spirit of carnival. But I think that one of the things that has happened through the ages is that our understanding or how we transmute has always been through those spiritual spaces, right? So the Baptist church has been that place where, or any kind of church in that space, calls forward begins to call forward the spirit of our ancestors that were dealing either in slavery or before. And so through the music or through the singing or through that, it's pulling it forward. And that's
like
part of
water getting in any way it can.
And so that's part of what I think had occurred. And so I understood it, which was great. I hadn't seen it much. I mean, I think after that, I may have seen it once or twice in like dancing and doing folkloric dance or doing Haitian dance or African dance or things like that. But it really happened for me. That was like my first time in the church. And then after that, since then, working with Orisha and working in Ifa, I've seen it more. Like I can recognize it more. I understand it more.
It's
so,
integrated into your reality.
It is, and it's always an opportunity. It's always I always say it's always an honor. There is something that occurs to be that close to any spirit at that time. And we were talking about it earlier that. Our ancestors and indigenous understandings, we've always had ways of communicating with spirit. Some people were audio, meaning they heard. Some people were visual, they saw. Some people had the gift of tongues, they are able to speak. And some people have all of it. Some people have the ability to be mounted and other people don't. Like all of those spiritual understandings are a part of our languages. sometimes, we've been cut off for so long that sometimes we don't even get a chance to tap into what that is.
You can go your whole life.
Right. And to integrate it. And even to bring the conversation that we had about cacao in, right? How do you now deal with it when you talk about integrating and having those spiritual experiences with plants, right? They're our ancestors. They have energies and understandings, and the way that they're cultivated will determine the way in which we actually have that interaction with them. So I had this conversation with a young brother the other day about marijuana. I was like, I know that you all, people think that they need it all the time, but my concern is, are you clear about how it's being cultivated, right? Because when you see a person who looks like they're being starved and they say that they're doing, right, they're smoking pot, my concern becomes, what kind of plant are you using? Because that's not the way the medicine is supposed to work. So if the medicine is working that way, you may be dealing with a plant that's being starved, which is one of the reasons why you look like you're being starved, which means that you may actually not be getting the medicine you think you're getting.
Right. You might be getting anesthetized. Well, and that's the fine line with the plant medicine. Are you getting anesthetized?
Right.
Or are you getting fed? Are you even, there's just days for me where prayer over a meal isn't thank you for this food, it's thank you morphic field of lettuce. Like the energy that this is, like the source of the source. And what happens when you're taking your time, you're having your joint at night, but you really sink in to, like, respect it for the energy that it is, and not a product that you bought.
Right. And
to
consume, which is a thing, right? Like, how are we having reciprocal relationships with everything that we're dealing with, right? Because everything is give and receive. So it's not just going to be by itself, right? You can't just take and not give back. So you have to have that reciprocity.
Well, and yes, and the way you phrased it, you made me realize that even when you think you don't, you do. Like that, there's a fundamentality to it, and that in fact might be what we mean by indigeny. And there's an unfairness in the creating of whiteness that strips them of their indigeny. Like, most white people don't understand that the years ahead of the transatlantic slave trade, the centuries ahead of it, were spent burning down and destroying their indigenous religious practices and cultures. That they too were woman-centered. And they don't understand, like, after the investment into whiteness, with the solidifying of whiteness, with the creation of America, there's a total disconnect. And sometimes when I am able to not go into a rage stroke about cultural appropriation, I understand it. Like, that's like, it's part of how I came to kind of a peace with tribal belly dance. As a visual practice, I love it. But it's like, you're wearing some Afghan woman's jewelry with an Indian lady's scarf, and you're going to do it to hip hop music.
I'm sorry.
That is literally what you're going to do. And I'm going to have my feelings about it, but I'm going to be able to look a little deeper now, because I realize, like, there's a prolific teacher. We should bring her back to New York, named Max Dashu. Max Dashu's work is chronicling women and spirituality across cultures throughout time and making the connecting points. And it was in studying with her that I was like, oh, the cultural appropriation is subconsciously about where's mine. Like, when you have had something taken from you and it's such an unconscious happening. subconscious, unconscious. It's happened so long ago, repressed in, yeah. We need our European friends to tap into those ancestors.
Right. Exactly. I mean, this used to be my argument. I think when I was getting ready to graduate from undergrad, and I was studying specifically Dunham dance and doing folkloric dance, and I had a drag out conversation with one of my professors because they tried to, play ballet as fine art, and I was like, no, ballet is actually a folk dance. They nearly lost all their stuff. I was like, ballet is a folk dance, and the only reason why it's been considered quote unquote fine art is because y'all have money.
Yeah.
But if you think about where it was done, right, where it was created, how it was created, it's a folk art.
Right. Well, and that's an interesting take because it made me think. It made me take on the idea that most of the time work that is on a proscenium stage is an artifice.
Right.
Because plays happen. We sat in a circle and heard a story. We danced in a circle and danced. We did a song together. This elevation of celebrity is a falsity. One of the, when I was about 5, doesn't matter. One of my first movie memories is Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh, wow.
Still one of my favorite movies. And it was a big brouhaha. Big brouhaha. We had to have like the church. We had to have like church talks about the movie because this like more so because it was dealing with religion more so than hair. Like hair like blew a lot of circuits, but to make Jesus Christ Superstar a rock opera was a big deal. And I lost. I had to push pause. I'm back. But what that movie teaches me every time I watch it, especially when I watch Brother Carl play Judas, he's one of my favorite actors. I realize in that finale, Jesus Christ Superstar, that Jesus is the basis of celebrity. That the way they've taken the way they've taken this story and turned it into a hero's journey. In our cultures, there wasn't no one hero. Everyone's hero.
Yeah.
But it's the foundation for everything. Everything that causes proscenium, that fills the stadiums, to that otherness. It causes a sense that greatness is other than you and an inequity among us. Ooh, what happens when we break through all that?
We get to live free. We get to develop. We get to integrate. We get to build our families and our communities. We no longer have the trap of ego telling us that we can't do it or we shouldn't do it because we begin to believe in what we came here to do.
Yes, that trust of self. Because what we're tapping on is basically saying like 98% of insecurities are manufactured. And we spend all this time, we're doing our healing work, we're doing our stuff, but it's like, at what point, people can understand that the system is evil or corrupt or whatever, but how deeply, when do we get to the bedrock of understanding just how deep the game is, to the point that the game you're playing isn't the game you think you're playing at all. And that, it's a terrific time to me to be alive because I do see the progression. We do see a lot of quick progression. We see snake oil salesmen. We see amazingness. And it's all super necessary because we're questioning. And I think that this is a good place. Like this concept of celebrity and the Jesus Christ concept being equalized and taken apart seems like a terrific place to jump into talking about Ori and Crystal Palace because that essential contact with self is a big deal. And it's amazing. I've lived in Brooklyn for, oh my goodness, since basically 1992 or 3.
Oh, wow.
There's been times away, but my whole adult life I've spent here. And watching the African diasporic spiritual community blossom, watching us blossom, watching people like you come into your glory and maturity and making so much change. It's been amazing. Amazing. But in our respective paths, we have this center inside our brain. So when I talk about the Crystal Palace, I'm talking about a physical location inside your brain. It's about an inch big, holds your pituitary, your pineal gland, your hypothalamus, and your thalamus. We work with it as one way you could say the place spirit enters, the place where your personality meets your soul self, meets your higher self, where the divine can pour in from, and accessing it through breath pattern, through focused work, physiologically, turning it on physiologically. You can say, and yes, there is a release of DMT, a natural release, not like the lifting of the veil to pass. You can go that far, but on a daily basis, you might not want to depart each day. What is the Ori?
So Ori is a Yoruba concept or construct around self, right? So Ori translates to mean head. But it's like beyond the physical head. Like you exist in your head. You know, people say I'm talking in my head. I hear myself. You exist in your head. But the Ori also houses the eyes. It houses the nose. It houses the mouth. But it also is this kind of sacred altar for communication and interaction. It's the place that, or the destiny we chose before we got here. So each person walks with their own Ori. You walk with your destiny. You walk with you're accountable to what you chose, right? You're accountable for what you chose. And in that accountability, you have the ability to, if you chose a bad Ori, for it to be, you can do work that will allow it to become a good Ori. Some of the work that we do with Ifa is around, one of his Arikis is about taking a bad head and making it good. So that's part of the work of Ori. But Ori also is this place where we see ourselves, we embrace ourselves. If we want blessings to manifest, if we've been praying for something to manifest, if our Ori is not going to accept it, the blessing won't manifest. If we don't, and think about it even in your own development of your life, right? People will always say, I want to be a millionaire. But if you haven't, in your own Ori, embraced the idea of what does it look like for me to be a millionaire? What would I do? How am I doing this? What are the things around that? That blessing can't come until you're ready to say, I'm ready to be a millionaire. Not to say that, and it's probably a part of your destiny. If it's come to you in that way, it's a part of your destiny. It's a part of the path that you're supposed to walk. You may not have been ready for it at 20 or 30 or 40, maybe 50 or 60. But, whatever time it comes because it's a part of our destiny. So that's the basics of Ori. I can read something that's very helpful as well. Central to the Yoruba cosmology is the concept of Ori. The Yoruba believe that every human being was born with a destiny or purpose, Ori, and was called to earth to discover and fulfill that purpose. The term Ori literally means head. That is the physical head. And it is conceived by the Yoruba as a representation of the inner essence in humans. It symbolizes our individual's essential nature. The person's Ori Inu, or inner head, is distinct from their physical or outer head, which helps us to understand our personality, what rules, controls, and guides our life and activities of the person.
With it being distinct from our physical, is it sitting above us? Is it an energetic field?
So the way that I love to explain it, I'm a firm believer, teacher and educator for many, many years. I always tell people, if you can explain it to toddlers, you can explain it to anybody.
Everybody. Mm-hmm.
Anybody and everybody will get it. So the way that I like to say it is that our physical head is where our Ori also sits, right? It has to land somewhere in the body. Matter matters, right? So it has to be somewhere. And one of the places that it sits is in our head. One of the things I was sharing with you earlier is like one of the practices that we have in terms of greeting your Ori every day is that you literally will hold your head in the morning and you'll greet your Ori and say, good morning. Today I want to accomplish, or I'm thankful for, or today my goal is, or I'm working on these blessings, or all of these things, right? So I'm greeting and I'm essentially programming my day. Because my Ori, now that it's aware of what I want to accomplish in that day, it's going to make sure, like I say, the universe is going to answer those prayers. Certain things are going to just start coming all of a sudden. You're like, interesting. I had that thought today. I pulled that thought. So that's the way in which we greet our Ori.
It's just before any jargons and books and seminars.
Well, see,
before NLP, there was the Ori.
Right. And so those, the issue is we've been so, like you said, the jargons we've been so caught up in all of those bigger pieces that it can't be this simple when life has always been simple.
Yes. And as you were talking about it and I relating to it, what we're trying to do, folks out there, is figure out the correlations between these cultures, like where they meet, how the Crystal Palace and the Ori come together. And I'll share in a second an experience that I had moving to and from with Renee. But it's so purified. And even when we were talking about plant medicine and the excessive use of that, that we are just striving so hard to shut down our frontal lobe. Like our thinking is driving us crazy.
Yeah.
And we keep thinking ourselves into the same ruts and corners of our life. And so I'm going to do this or I'm going to try that. And I'm all for it. I think that those things are here to help us remember how to open them up, and that we're going through a phase right now where it might seem a bit excessive because there's so much to break through. And I want to get to a point where I'm running into people that say, I used to do it this many times a year, and now I don't really need it anymore because it opened. And that isn't just on individuals. It's on the reshifting of community culture, having community culture, like for real.
And I think it's also around the accountability of the people who are facilitating it to ensure that they actually know how it was used indigenously.
Well, that'd be great.
Right? Because
that'd be good. Like, that'd be great. That'd be great. I literally, even before this new craze of it, gosh, this was 20 years ago, a little more, like 17, 18 years ago. I had a buddy that was going to upstate New York like monthly doing ayahuasca. And they were having the most terrifying, you think you want to do it because it sounds so mystical and magical, but the just terrifying experiences. So what I've learned is in Taoism, this is a big connection. This maybe Ori is some culmination, and spirits who want to come explain it to us, feel free to join. We welcome you. The Crystal Palace and the immortal fetus. The concept of the immortal fetus is preparing, because it would make sense. It's immortal, so it's been here with you the whole time. And what you strive in your spiritual practice to do is deepen and correlate a conscious relationship with it, such that at the time of your crossing over, that final lifting of the DMT veil, you're not popping out like, where am I? Waiting for a light or anything. You know where you are because you've been going there, because you've been building this body. You've been building this relationship every morning. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, that talk brings me to this thing of, how simple but how much indigenous practice was bigger than what we understood. Like we saw certain things and we thought, oh, that's just why they used it. So for example, when you appease your Ori, we use coconut. And so for the longest time, I was just like, interesting, coconut. Why do we use coconut? Da-da-da. And so we did some research, that coconut helps to remove the plaque off the brain. It helps to loosen up and creates the juice that's necessary, especially when people are dealing with lost memory or fogginess or any of those kinds of things. And so part of the ritual is to actually use coconut and to eat the coconut.
To eat coconut and even just pour it on
your head.
Because it's all. Well, and I think coconut also, like baby coconut water, it also helps your gray matter and like the same thing, because we transition, and a lot of focus on the reason why it's encouraged for especially older people, the sooner you start, the better, to have a Tai Chi practice, is those practices help as your gray matter starts to go, it brings the white matter into play. And I feel like there's something about, there's a correlation, like the sciencey people say, the water in coconut helps your brain plasm. And I also appreciate that there's usually those 3 dots on a coconut.
Yes.
Right up there, the wisdom of things.
Yeah.
The wisdom of things. Wow. Ooh. There's a lot. Yes. So the immortal fetus, I think I believe that this is an ongoing conversation, because the immortal fetus notes are not what I brushed myself up on. But because geographically in the brain, so it's right, the frontal lobe is your Ori. How does the rest of it play in? How does
So your Ori is not just located in your brain. So you have your Ori, then you have your Ori Inu, which is in your belly button.
In your dantian, and your so this is your upper dantian and your lower dantian.
And then you have 2 more spots. You have the top of your nail on your right foot and the top of your nail on the left foot.
Really? Which nail? Big toe?
The big toe, sorry.
Big toe. Which would correlate in this practice to behind that joint behind the big toe is called the bubbling spring, where you pull up earth energy. And it's interesting. One of my ways to practice in that is to reach my big toe forward. Because once it grounds into the earth, that little space behind, I feel it open up more. So I'm running around on a hypothesis that much about inner alchemy and physical Taoist practices. I know that we all hung out together, like all of these great teachers. Everybody who had anything to share, to contribute to the spirit of humans, they just went home and related it to they bought their culture together with everyone else around the world, and then they related it to one another as it fit the environment for them. Wow. Where should we go from here?
I know, because it's a lot. It's like, ooh.
Yeah, I have this one thing that I liked. It is. It's so very much. Ooh, I'm going to be in editing. The Crystal Palace is an ovid shape. The shape is in agreement, but the color is, that's something different. Yay, I'm going to have to edit. It'll be fabulous. The internal head center is white and colored, associated with the principle of spirit or shin and yang energy, heavenly energy. For in this orientation, it is Mother Earth and Father Sky. And I think that also, does Ori have a gender? It's both.
Because we're all energy. The gendering of energy is a
new thing,
new world concept.
So much of what we're talking,
it's a new world concept.
So much of the confusion that we are talking about and unraveling here is very left brain. Yeah, it takes me to in whose interest was it to make sure everyone was confused? Exactly.
That's a good question. That's a very good question, actually. It does benefit folks for people to be confused, but again, as our frontal lobes uncrust and people start, their third eye starts to awaken, there's really nothing else you can do. Folks they're just gonna awaken. That's what's gonna happen. They're gonna notice certain things that they didn't notice before, or be moved by certain things that they weren't moved by before. And if you are paying attention to it, it makes you ask questions.
Yes. Yeah. I guess the world changes in this incremental consciousness shift. And I hope to keep coming back and checking out how it happens. I was looking at a news report on the new dress requirements for women in Afghanistan. They went from suggesting black veil, full gloves, to requiring it recently. So this picture is a group of women. It looks like what to you and me would be like the lecture hall at a university, and every single one of them is shrouded in black. And that is the scariest shit. It's because America not perfect, but at least you don't have to abide by the laws of somebody's deific thing, whether or not you believe in it. Because I'm sure they really don't give a fuck if you're not Muslim. That's what you're wearing if you want to get in and out of these streets alive. And I just want to know how much longer with the Abrahamics. Yo, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're holding on. So.
They're holding on tight.
And it's showing up in all, we had this conversation earlier about even in politics. It's like it's showing up everywhere because folks are realizing that control is being lost, and so they don't know what else to do. And so we got to keep doing the work that we're doing and being dedicated to what liberation looks like. Yeah. And to understand that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
It isn't. And I'm one of those people, people are like, it's the Aquarian age. They're like, it's here, it's here, it's here. I'm one of those people. I'm like, I think it's like, now in this conversation, I'm like, I still feel like it's about 270 years away. Because
this change takes time. It's not going to, you have acute moments where something makes something happen.
A flashpoint.
Right at that moment. But then you're still dealing with the old patterns. You're still dealing with the old talk. And so those patterns aren't going to just disappear. They're going to hold on for dear life. Like, we still want to be here. And so that's what you're dealing with. And so now you're watching smaller increments of it happening. And then, again, there's probably going to be another flashpoint where it wipes out another opportunity for people to say, oh, we can't do. And they're like, oh, why have we been doing it like this all this time? That's just stupid. We should have been doing X. And so that flashpoint again, so it's a marathon, not a sprint, and it requires people being dedicated to the work and doing the work in the way in which you've been destined to do it, because everything that everyone is doing is necessary. Sometimes you feel like, oh, I'm not making a dent, but everything that you're doing is necessary. Because if you're not doing it, ain't nobody else doing it, which means it ain't getting done. Exactly. It means it ain't getting done,
Just
which
like
means
the dishes.
Right. So that part of us understanding, again, this concept of Ori and our purpose, we come here with very specific things that we need to be getting done. And for a really long time, we've been distracted. We haven't been doing the things we said we were going to do because of all the other things. So how do we get on point with all the things that need to be done?
How do we get on point with all the things that need to get done?
We do the work that you're talking about around the Crystal Palace. We do the work around our Ori. We start checking in with our ancestors. We start developing the skills that we need. We get into practices that allow for us to be well and balanced. And then we do that for everyone else around us, because it can't just be us, right? Part of what society has taught us is that us, one individual, is going to, but it's never been us, one individual. Our communities were never built on us, one individual. And so because of that, because of us staying disconnected, we haven't been able to connect and collectively be able to do the work forward.
See,
so
that's
what
that
it is.
Jesus Christ superstar celebrity system.
Yep. Right, exactly. Right, so that one person is the pedestal or the proscenium or da-da-da-da. And so we all believe like that's where we need to get. The problem is that person on stage has nobody clapping for them if no one's in the audience. Everyone has a role to play. You got to figure out what your role is. And sometimes the person that we put on the stage actually shouldn't even be there.
Yeah.
So it's that constant opportunity for us to reevaluate, to learn new skills, to integrate those new skills, to find places where we're balanced, to call in community when we need to participate in our rituals as we should, to reconnect to nature in all different forms. When's the last time you went and stood outside in the rain?
Oh, last week. Okay.
But I'm saying in general, like we
People
literally fear.
Things that we avoid are
like,
the things that we need.
Go stand in the rain. Go touch grass. Go touch water. I heard a little girl yesterday said, "Mommy, I want to go touch the water." I was like, I want to go touch the water. Great. Go let that child touch the water.
Yeah, listen to
those
real
are those
impulse.
things those are the things that we need to be doing more of.
And in that, it's also really important to let it be deeply intimate and personal so that you're self-guided. I think that is a lot about this intersection of Ori, Crystal Palace, Immortal Fetus, that it is, there is something in trusting your navigation system. It's great. I love both of you and I. We stay in a class. It's great to study. It's great to study with people, but just that in the studying and in the courses that you're really, that you're adding to your library of tools and accept yourself as perfect, whole, and complete. Even though we're always all going to be dusting out some corner. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to be saved. You are essentially very, very well. And yes, so I guess part of our prescription today is to wake up, clasp your forehead by the palms, and talk. Talk. And that's the ultimate. That I love productive self-care and self-love. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love you. Like, Renee also makes incredible soaps and all the delicious things we like to make our body silky with. I love that part too. But it's beyond self-care, what is self-nourishment? Speaking of which, so Renee runs 2 huge community spiritual events a year at the solstice, one online, one we travel for. She consults numerous nonprofit cultural organizations and probably businesses. She helps at the Board of Ed coming in, doing self-care, nourishment, educating our kids on how to do same, and our educators. She has a shop that she runs. She has an amazing podcast too, and she has the most remarkable daughter you could even ever imagine, my swim buddy. Did I get everything?
And I'm an author now.
Oh, and she has a book. So, how do you do all this?
I always tell people I listen to spirit, right? And so when spirit says do X, I do X. Now, in my calendar of things or in a year, it could get really dicey. So, for example, we just finished our spiritual festivals. Right before we started our spiritual festivals, I was getting ready to go into winter summer solstice. And I literally was like, okay, I can only do one thing at a time. I'll plan out my calendar and know what I'm going to be doing. But sometimes people may not hear about it until right before because there are other things brewing. But I'm really committed to doing the things that I know I'm supposed to be doing. And even asking and consulting and doing divination to find out, can I take a break this year? And they'd be like, nope. I'd be like, okay, great. Oh, and you're going to do X, Y, and Z too. I'm like, sure, why not? And so I see it as a part of my community service. It's really a part of my community service. These are the things that I'm supposed to put into the world. And if I don't put them in, no one else is going to put them in. And that's not from an ego standpoint. My goal is to create and hold space where people can be themselves and they can find their liberation and find a pathway and connect in community in a way that once they've done that, they now have more tools to go out and do the things that they're supposed to be doing. And
fortifying people.
Yeah, and so that is what I'm seeing. Like every single event that I've done, I hear about it. When I finish the event, I'm probably on the floor somewhere. Like every time I do that virtual event, I'm like at 5:07, I'm on the floor. Everyone's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, I just need like 10 minutes. It's not even decompress. I just need to lay on the floor for a few minutes. This is a lot of energy.
Integrate.
And you would think that it wouldn't be because we're online, but I can feel what's happening with people. I can hear what's happening with people. I can see people like doing these amazing things and sometimes not even knowing people. They just met them in that one session. And I can see it happening. And so it's a lot, but it's, again, the thing that we're supposed to be doing. So I just take it one step at a time, and I try my best to, I speak to the peoples, and I say, are we supposed to do it on this time? And we go with it. I'm really good at putting myself on a deadline, and when it doesn't happen, that's one thing. But there are other times where they may be pushing me to, like, get it done. So, like, my book coming out on my birthday was, I need you to push this out because you have other things you need to be working on, and you can't hold this anymore. Perfect in person. I think the back of it has
You found the typo.
I found a typo, and I was like, you know what? If it becomes really, really a big deal, I'll just put out a second edition. And it was an elder who said that to me that made me understand that what I was holding on to was not what I needed to hold on to. The medicine needs to be in people's hands. You need to get it out of you. I don't care. Just be done. And so sometimes you just gotta be like, I'm done. What's next? I'm done. What's next? And then that then starts the process of being able to do the other things. Because this is, we talk a lot about initiation being the beginning, not the end. People think you get to initiation. No, initiation is actually the beginning. Sometimes when you do that first thing, it's just the initiation into the other part that you need to be in.
Right.
I can't get to the other stuff because I haven't done that first part. The first part was push it out. Great. It's here. Now what's next? Yeah.
I hear a lot of grace and a lot of discipline.
On both ends, yes.
Yes.
On both ends. And a lot of compassion for self. Because you can get stuck in a rut feeling like you weren't good enough or you didn't do something. And sometimes it's just about the timing. Like, it wasn't for that time, but it's for this time. And you stick it out and you do it. I mean, all types of stuff happens when I try to push go on something. You'd be like, this should have been so easy. And then you upload something and it's like, no, I don't want it in that format. I want it in this format. Well, I don't know what format that is, but we're going to figure it out because I got a deadline in 20 minutes. This thing I have to hit send. But when you get to the end of it, you're like, oh, okay. Or like I was doing something and the numbers that popped up at the very end once I hit send was 444. I'm in my 44th year. And I was like, okay, got it. I see y'all.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you got to do.
That's all. That's it. It's easy. Do you, in the rhythm of everything, you must schedule down days?
I do.
0 days.
I'm very, very big at scheduling down days. And sometimes my down days don't even become down days because there are like family and things like that have to be done. But yeah, this has been a really busy summer for me. Like this summer, this June to August, I was like, whoa, we did a lot in 3 months. So I literally will tell folks I'm on sabbatical in September. And so I'll have like events and things like that and trying to like reorganize my coaching and things like that. But I won't do major things at all. And so, yeah, I do take those times. Trying to get better at scheduling downtime in my actual schedule. And so this is going to be the year of that for me. Like everything goes in the schedule.
Girl, it's so...
like everything.
Yeah, it's so hard. Oh, good. I got that. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I'm being crazy. Be the medicine. Wait, hold on. We're going to start that again. All right, Renee, I see you have your first book right there. Be the medicine. Tell us everything.
Yeah, so our first publication, Be the Medicine, Pathways to Healing and Liberation Through Ancestral Plant Intelligence. Be the Medicine is also one of the phrases or quotes from Dr. Fukuyao in his self-healing book. And he talks about the fact that we are medicine for each other. Things that we do is medicine for the world. And so this book really just takes it's really short. It's like 55 pages. And we just really take a moment to talk about what is ancestral intelligence, what is the healing archetype, how do we connect to plants and plant intelligence, how do we connect to water, have you talked about what your medicine is? Something really, really simple, and also different ways that we can integrate that into our lives. So for me personally, many times people say, well, you just need to do, but they never really give you like what the thing is. I'm that person. Like, I just want to give you the thing because my goal is not for me to hold the knowledge. I wanted to give it to people so that you can go out and do it yourself and discover what it means to integrate it into your life. So, we talk about water and making sure that we're hydrated and that we're connected to water. Well, are we drinking our water? Where's your water coming from? Are you being purposeful with water when you shower? When you what does it mean to be hydrated or dehydrated? Not just physically, but spiritually, mentally, physically. What does that mean when we're dehydrated and how do we rehydrate ourselves? So we talk about, concepts like that and just very simple ways of how you can deal with that issue. And so that's part of, this work. This work is connected to also my work with flower essences. As you know, I do a flower essence line. We're currently in a beta test. So some of that work is also in the book. So I feature some of the flowers from that work as well. And we're just going to keep building on being the medicine.
And where can we find Be the Medicine?
It is available on Amazon in hard copy as well as Kindle.
Fantastic. And where is your store?
So I work in partnership with Chief Olaje at the 256 Healing Center, which is located at 1393 Flatbush Avenue between Farragut and Foster. And so there we do work around Yoruba culture. We do workshops and so on and so forth. We have our festivals that are there as well. We have a huge festival that comes out of that space called the Egungun or Isheshe Festival. So that's a time where at the beginning of the Yoruba New Year in the first weekend of June, we are paying homage to our ancestors. We do a procession from the store to the African burial grounds that are over there. And then we also do a lot of ancestral veneration practice during that time. And so that's one of the things that we're there. And then we have the opportunity for other healers to come and work in the space as well. So we do some of the work around Orisha and Ifa, but we also have folks who do massage or Reiki or flower essence, or just come in and they want to talk, or Ori appeasements. We've had people come in and they wanted to appease their Ori, and so we do those as well.
What is Ori appeasement?
So it's the same. It's like if you were doing an offering to water, if you were doing an offering to the earth, you're doing an offering to your Ori. And so there are very specific components that go into that. Like we talked about earlier, you would offer and say these very specific chants, as well as give coconut, or you can give different animals that represent different things. And then that person will sit for a minute and kind of, what I say, percolate. And what happens is it's this almost integration of that ceremony. In that one moment, your Ori is starting to say, oh, something has happened. You get a minute to kind of meditate and see what happens. And then people go out into the world. And many times that, again, is that opportunity to clear the fog, to find some clarity, to talk a little bit about, what's been going on in your mind, or really reflect on what your purpose is, because sometimes we forget. And so these are rituals that have been set up by our ancestors to help us to remember. And so that's one of the ways that we do it through Ori appeasement.
Ooh. Ways to remember our way back inside. Thank you so much, Renee, for joining me on the Shiro Space podcast. My last question for guests is, what is your wish for all the sister Shiros out there?
My wish is that we all reconnect with our personal power and put it out into the world. And put it out into the world in a way that doesn't require us to label it. The good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent. There is this song by Dawn Tallman that I love to play in all of my workshops, and it's about celebrating yourself. And she talks about the scars that you see are the scars of the work that I've done in my journey. And that we have to respect those scars, because those scars become our testimonies. And we have to stop being afraid of sharing our testimony. When we learn something about ourselves, you need to get out there and tell somebody. Because in you saying that story, you're also reaffirming who you are. And in that reaffirmation, we're able to then really sit in our power. So I want every woman to find their pathway to healing, and it doesn't have to look like what everyone says it is. And that through that pathway, they then find liberation. And freedom is the one thing that we all need. And it's not the kind of popular freedom thought. It's freedom to be who you are unapologetically, and to step into the world and know that what you have to give is going to be received.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us on the Shiro Space. I'm looking forward to many more terrific adventures with you, sister friend. Have a wonderful time wherever you are in your day, everyone. Be loving and reflective.